Well, hello, welcome.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing very good. It's a fantastic day.
It's a great day.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for listening to our
Thanks
podcast.
for joining us.
I still can't, I mean, it's 10 weeks into this. So I still can't believe we even have a podcast. Only in America.
Only
in America could we have a podcast. I guess that's not true. You could have a podcast really anywhere you live. I think it's awesome that we're able to do this. I'm grateful to all those of you listening. Thanks for so much for those of you who have, well, you've shared it. You've told us you've liked it. Well, if you didn't like it, you didn't tell us that. So thanks for that. Also, I guess the long list of thank yous include those who have reviewed the podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, written a comment, posted about it on social media. We hear it. Hey, it's the Luskos. And by that, I mean Jennie and Levi. Just
hey,
us.
It's us.
The us part of the Luskos.
Uskos.
The Uskos?
Oh.
Hey, it's
We're
the Uskos.
us in Luskos.
There is no I in Lusko.
No.
But there is us.
There's no we, but there is us.
Ooh, I like it. So
I've actually never thought of that before.
that there's no I in Lusko?
No, but that there's an us in Lusko. That's really cool.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. If we had a team, it could be part of our chant. We do have a team. A family team.
Family team.
That's very nice.
Excuse me.
You're excused. So today, later in the episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about how to view pain as a platform. I think it's a really challenging subject. So before we get to all that, I hope you can just take a minute even, and as we're talking, just think about any pain that you're dealing with in your life right now, any hard circumstances or situations, and we'll be talking about that. But before we get into that, on the lighter side of life, I think it's a really important perspective to think about how oftentimes our initial thoughts when anything happens can oftentimes be wrong. And, there's this saying of like, go with your gut. But the reality is that time and time again, in the rearview mirror of life, we will all oftentimes look at things that in the moment were among the most difficult as being down the road, some of the most important and some of the most special and some of the most precious, because those have the potential to become defining moments. I even think about, we were just talking a little bit before we started recording about that crazy idea in the Psalms of He makes me lie down. And how have you experienced that in life? That even times where maybe, you needed rest but weren't prioritizing it, God forced it on you as a gift.
Yeah, gosh, I feel like it's happened a lot throughout my life, where whether it's even a health thing. Like I remember earlier in the year even where I got really sick and it forced me, like I literally had to lie down and sleep for however many days it was. But it forced me to literally lie down, and it forced me to get the rest that I needed. And I didn't know I needed it. And obviously I was sick too, so my body needed it. But I think there are times where God does seemingly kind of like, you just lie down for a second. You just kind of, you get the rest you need. You get the sleep you need. You just take a little time out, and not necessarily even in a bad way, but just a little like, let's just take a break here. And you focus on your health and your rest and your family or whatever it is. But I do look back and see how that has really been something. And even recently when I broke my ankle, like I feel like that was a time even where I was in the midst of like crazy, it was a busy season, but it was almost like, and I know God doesn't cause these things to happen, or like, oh, I'm just going to have her break her ankle and I'm going to have him like get really sick so he can rest. But I think he just allows these things to happen because he knows that we're human, and he knows that we need a break. And I think sometimes we just need it. We need him to kind of do the little T with his hands and call a timeout and just have us rest and take a break. And I think that if we can have that perspective in it, it's so helpful versus, oh my gosh, this happened, or why do I have to go through this? But more just take it in stride as, okay, God, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to rest and I'm going to spend time with my family. And I think that if we can kind of see it as it is in the moment, that kind of helps with the resting part.
Well, it's really an interesting thing to think about how much worse you perform in life when you're not rested.
Yeah.
When you're not sleeping well. I mean, it is meant to be a reset every single night, that during sleep, your body replenishes itself, your emotions are replenished, your stress level, your body's able to take away stresses and really rebuild itself. So when you're not rested, in a real literal sense, you're not your best. So the idea of, burning the candle at both ends and just, pouring yourself out relentlessly, you think you're doing more, but in the end, you actually have less of yourself to give. You're not the best version of yourself for those in your life, the work that you're doing. So when you think about, the idea of he makes me to lie down. Now, whatever he has to do that, even if in the short term, it's not something we're loving, in the long term, he's actually guarding us being fresh and, revitalized and the version of ourselves we need to be down the road.
Yeah.
So whether it is a natural thing like sickness that kind of just is built into this creation, when you're not sleeping well, you more easily get sick. So God sure can do that through the natural world that he's given to us. But also, there are seasons when he has to, sort of bench us for a while so we can recover, so we can, be strengthened, so that, we can learn the hard lessons. David talks also about, before I was afflicted, I went astray. And sometimes those afflictions that come that none of us would choose if we were picking how our life was going to be run are the things that cause us to get centered again, to get strong again, to remember not to take for granted things we take for granted oftentimes when things are going well. And it's in those moments that we can be recalibrated.
I love that. And even just thinking about that, being benched, because there's so many different reasons of when you're in a game, or like you did soccer for a little bit growing up. I did track and basketball. And I remember all the times where I needed to take a break or be benched. And sometimes you can think about that and it's like, oh, that's such a negative thing. But really, like, there's so many things that make that. So like, maybe it's something that you did. So you did something against a teammate or the opposite team. Or it's something where, you need to get some water, you just need to take a break. And I think regardless of like you said, like, if we put it on ourselves, if we were the ones that made the mistake, or we're the ones that stopped obeying God or whatever, I think it's just a time to look inward and to what Psalm 139 says, God, search me and know me and see if there's anything inside me that's displeasing to you, anything that's evil, any sin. Just I want my heart to be open before you, so you can do the surgery that you need to do, so you can give me the rest that I need. You can do what only you can do in this healing process of me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Lead me in the way that's closest to you. And so I think regardless, we should always just have that perspective and heart of, okay, God, do in me what you want to do in me. And if I'm going to be benched, I want to find the beauty in this benching right now. I want to find what the strengthening. I want to truly find the rest that I need and a correction that I need, or whatever it is that you want to do in me. And I think that will change everything when you're sitting on the bench and wondering, I want to be in, God, put me in, coach. Like, I want to be in there. I want to be working. But I think going with the flows and the ebbs and the ups and the downs, and allowing God to do the work that he wants to do in us, that will change the way we view the bench.
For sure. And when I think you sit there and find yourself on the sidelines for a season or for a spell or for, a quarter, you remember and you're reminded that the team goes on without you, and I think we all need reminders sometimes that our time on this earth isn't forever, that,
yes.
During a season of rest, you see, oh, wow, that life goes on, and it's going to go on when I'm gone. So it kind of reminds you that, the self-importance that so easily dominates, like that, I'm the center, I'm keeping this thing going. It's like, well, actually, all of us are expendable to some degree. All of us, you take yourself out of an organization, the organization is going to find its way forward. You take yourself out of a team, that team's going to have to, by necessity, keep going and figure out a way. And really, in those vacuums, greatness can rise up. You might find that there was, a little tree into the shadow of the big oak that got, taken out momentarily through a suspension or whatever, that now is greatness is forced upon them because there's that leadership vacuum. So I think what's healthy about a time of rest, whether you got mono or, you ended up with an injury or through a bad decision you made, you found yourself on the sidelines for a season, is just to remember that you don't keep the world spinning.
Good.
And that lesson is really important. And that, God is continually keeping the earth moving without you. It's incredible to realize, but it's going to go on. It was spinning before you. It's going to spin after you.
So good. And knowing also that God's timing is perfect, because when I broke my ankle, I ran into someone who said that he had the same break. And he said, you just be careful, do everything the doctor tells you to do and rest the way the doctor tells you to rest, because what should have taken a year for me to heal took 2 years. And so I think even that mindset of okay, when God tells you to rest, rest. When you need to take a break, because we don't want to perpetuate the problem. We don't want to make something that maybe God meant to bring strength to us to actually be more of a big deal, and allow God to do the healing and the things that have happened in your past. I think that so often we kind of can push those things aside, but it's no, bring it out in the open and allow God to heal. And whether that is counseling or whatever, but bringing those things, when God brings them to light, let him heal it, so that it's not something that you're just limping along with unnecessarily for 2 years when it should have taken 1 or whatever. But
yeah, it's that's that verse in Ecclesiastes. It made me think of that when you're talking about, sharpening a saw. And if you take the time to sharpen the saw, you'll be able to do so much more with it.
Gosh.
It seems like, oh man, to stop working, there's so much I need to do in this forest, so many trees to cut down, or, so much to do. And if I stop to sharpen it,
you're going to waste time.
I'm going to waste time that I could be chopping, but it's every swing after you sharpen it is going to be so much more effective.
Gosh, that's so good.
And in moments where we are not resting, in moments where we're not prioritizing, mental health or vacation or, the idea of a day off to replenish, there's going to be so much less of you without that. And you see that played out to a great extent in the nation of Israel when they ended up in captivity, because they refused to rest and trust God with, the giving the land the rest it was supposed to get. And then eventually, they eventually had no choice but to give that time they wanted.
Right. Well, it's so funny because you saying that, I just think of how I lost my train of thought.
I like that it's called a train of thought, because I imagine just now a train pulling out of the station and you waving frantically at it no, don't leave without me. Choo. And it's choo, 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 choo. It's in Back to the Future Part 3 where that girl's on the horse trying to get on the train to get Emmett.
Oh man.
Clara. Her name was Clara.
No, literally that happens so often where I just wonder if the train even cares about me.
That is so insensitive of that train just to rush out of there.
Where'd you go?
Speaking of Back to the Future, what a great movie. I'm so glad they put those on Netflix recently, and to get to go back and relive the glory that was the late 80s and the 90s. I mean, I realize we all somewhat romantically idealize the era in which we were children. But I think regardless of, the time you were born in, those are just great movies. They've held up very well.
They really have. I love the third one's my favorite.
Sure.
The second one, not so much. But you kind of have to have the second one to get to the third one. If you don't
get the second one, you can't enjoy the third one because you don't understand his love of the Doc's love of the Wild West.
Yeah.
You won't understand how he ended up there.
I know.
It's important.
I know. Oh, my train came back.
Oh, goodness. Welcome back, train.
Okay. So what I was going to say was I'm so thankful that you're a planner. You love even planning our family vacation. I joke around with people that you're the travel agent for our family, but you enjoy it and you love it. But what I love is that you've worked so hard for most of our marriage and all of our kids' lives to create rest and space to for vacation or family days or Sabbath, like you in particular, and we do it together, but really you have fought for that rest and putting it into our schedule and fighting for it. And I just think that for me, like I feel like so often I'm so unaware and, oh yeah, next year that'll be great to go on vacation. Meanwhile, I'm not doing anything about it, but you're literally like planning for it. And so we come to the next year and it's like, oh, here we are on vacation, but you worked hard to get us there. And so I'm just thankful that you have fought for that for our family, but it really has become a rhythm. And I think you do have to fight for that rhythm. And yes, I think, and I know that God's going to bring those times of making us lie down, but if we can just kind of get those rhythms in place where we're naturally, oh, this is the day that we're resting as a family. This is the time where we're vacationing as a family. Like, I think that is preloading that time where we're getting it, where we may not necessarily need to be quote unquote benched as much. But anyways, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for that.
I think that it's both. I think if you choose to prioritize rest, I think if you choose to regularly build those into the rhythms of your life, I think you're going to be less redlining and less depleted, less on fumes as a rule. But then when out of his wisdom, out of his sovereignty, God allows something in your life, whether it's a sickness, whether it's a season where you have no choice but to be active, I think your perspective should be to almost say like, hey, I didn't even know I needed this. I choose to believe, though, that there's some reason that in the next season, I'm going to need even more rest.
Gosh,
and you might have been rested up, or so you thought, but there might be the chance to do some self-work, to do some fixing up inside your own heart, inside your own life, to, certainly don't waste that. Don't waste that opportunity to double down and then know that down the road when some hard time comes or some challenging time comes, God may have seen that you needed, or even just to remember and realize, like, there may have been something that you missed out on from not being there. I mean, even a flat tire, it's like, if you get a flat tire, it's like, you could look at that and just be like, well, this is unbelievable. I was doing all this and I can't believe, or it's like, you know what, God, maybe I need this minute here on this other road. Maybe there's an accident that's not going to happen. I think just choosing to believe in God's sovereignty and resting in that is so comforting. And it just gives you permission to view anything you face with a different perspective.
Yes. Well, and that's what I love so much about when you write about this in your book, Through the Eyes of a Lion, you talk about pain being a microphone. And really, that's a perspective shift, because so often we'll walk through difficult days and painful things, and we won't notice that that's actually a microphone, like up to our face, in our hands, and that God has allowed because he wants to use us. And there's actually a purpose in the pain that we're experiencing. And honestly, when you first started talking about this, which was years ago actually, but the truth that pain is a microphone, it just changed me, and it changed the way I viewed big pain, but also daily, just the daily things. And I think we should talk about a little bit where that came from and what that means, that our pain can be a microphone.
Well, a long time ago, I heard a C.S. Lewis quote about pain being a megaphone. And the megaphone is your ability to hear God. God puts a megaphone to his lips. He says that God whispers in pleasures and speaks to us, in trials, I think it was, but he shouts to us in our pain. I may have butchered that, but the essence of it is that God's voice gets louder in pain. It's amplified because you hear him better, because maybe you're not distracted so much that you actually are listening. Yeah. Maybe it's because you have nowhere else to go when the bottom drops out. So in those moments, we tend to look to God. So I do believe, and I still believe in that statement. But I also kind of felt like, well, that's not the only thing pain does. Pain doesn't just amplify God's voice. It actually amplifies our own. Yeah. And in that, that if you kind of picture yourself facing a hardship, and right now I asked you earlier in the episode to think about, that divorce, to think about that slight, to think about being overlooked, to think about being forgotten, neglected, oppressed in whatever way. If you choose to believe with faith that in that hardship, God actually was putting a microphone into your hands, almost like the spotlight turns on, your side stage, God hands you that mic. And in that trial, he was handing to you something that was not just going to amplify his voice to you, but amplify your voice to the world and your reach to the world. It really does change the perspective that you have and your entire mindset going into that hardship.
Gosh, no, that's a perspective change. And that really, instead of thinking, God, why is this happening? Or why didn't you stop this? Or whatever, it's okay. Here, if you're calling me to this, I want to step up to the spotlight. I want to step up to the microphone, and I want to speak what you've called me to speak. That's beautiful.
Well, it's I think, first of all, I want to acknowledge it's easier said than done.
True.
It's easy to say, with a rosy lens, like, don't worry, cheer up, buttercup. It's going to be, it's almost like Princess Bride, I'll most likely kill you in the morning. Have a good night's sleep. It's like to say it is daunting. But I think our own experience and even just a casual view of Scripture or really all of church history, it bears witness. You think about Esther. Esther's one of the sparkliest, brightest lights in the Old Testament, but Esther's story begins with the death of her mom and her dad. Oh, it's a great story. It's a beauty pageant. She won. She became yay, she saved her people. Like, pause. You remember that she was an orphan, had to stand at the graves of mom and dad, be raised by her cousin Mordecai, and really put her life into her own hands when she stepped into the king's palace. So all of that boils down to incredible complexity. It's like, yes, we hear her voice loud now. Yes, for thousands of years, people all around the world have celebrated Esther's courageous spirit. But do we forget that the only way that loud voice got to us was because a microphone called pain was trusted to her hand?
Yeah.
So, we could go on and on and on and on and on. Joseph, David, Elijah. Jesus even said, which of the prophets did not your fathers kill? I mean, They all went through it. Isaiah got his head cut off. Oh, I love the book of Isaiah. It's like Jeremiah. Oh, Jeremiah 29:11. That one really gets me. Every time I hear it, I just get shivers. Holy Spirit goosebumps. Like, do you know he got thrown into a pit? Did you know he was so depressed that he said he felt like his teeth were broken with gravel and that an arrow had pierced his liver? I mean, this was a guy who went through a bad day. So the only way for the amplification, I believe, is oftentimes, sadly, persecution. Those are the things that really cause us to have a platform that will be listened to by people who are going to really find a legitimacy of what we say because of what we're going through.
Gosh.
And, it's fine to say, Jesus said we're the light of the world, so I'm excited about that. But our neighbors, I'm convinced, they politely will listen to us tell about how Jesus is the light of the world. But when the lights get cut off, then they're leaning in to see if we can glow in the dark. And when we believe and when we endure in the fire and are willing to live out what we preached in the sun, I think then we have an opportunity to be heard in a way that we never would be in days of pleasure.
Yeah. Well, you also talk about training for the trial you're not yet in, and having this perspective of going into a trial, knowing that God might have a plan for you through it, a plan for others through it, not just for you to grow and to thrive and to hold on tight to him, but also to be a strengthening and a help to other people in their time of need. But this is all part of that training in that, because we're all going to enter into trials, difficulties. I mean, James says, consider it pure joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that it's actually this thing that the trial, it said various, all different kinds, but it's actually going to produce a patience in you that's going to help you continue on, and that's going to strengthen you to keep showing up and to keep moving forward and to keep fighting forward. And so having that perspective, I think of those who are listening who maybe aren't even in a trial right now, but knowing that one will come in the future. Like all of this perspective is so helpful just to have as a training, to have as a lens, and to have as just a helpful mind frame, so that as you live your life and as you go through a difficult thing today, or you go through a heartache and pain next week, or whatever is to come, that we're actually ready. And we have kind of a stance. Like I think of a fighter or a boxer, like they're not on their heels. They're not even standing straight legged. Like they got a stance going on. They're on their toes. Their legs are bent. Their arms are up. Like they're ready. And I think that this kind of talk, pain as a microphone, and anticipating the way God wants to use us through our pain, is like that stance, readying us for whatever is to come.
No doubt. I think the concept of suffering is so uncomfortable for us that when it comes, it's so bewildering. But when you're saying, you not only have a plan for pain, but you're expecting it. I mean, not that we're, gluttons for punishment,
right,
or sadists, like, oh, I'm excited, or seeking out opportunities to be persecuted, no. Just being a mean person. And then people are mean to you, like, see, I'm being persecuted for righteousness' sake. It's like, I don't know, you might just be being persecuted because you're mean.
Yes.
But when you have it in your heart that you can be a Joseph, and no matter what life throws at you and the betrayals that are handed to you, that you can choose to believe, like his speech at the end is one of the most challenging things in the Bible. He says, you did this. You did this to me. He's not letting them off. He said, you did this to me, but in this, God sent me in to save many lives. He was given a microphone called betrayal, false imprisonment, being forgotten about. But in that, he didn't become bitter because he chose to believe there was a purpose in it. And I think that's really ultimately, when I wrote Through the Eyes of a Lion, and I specifically was writing this chapter, I think God really wanted to help me empower people. Because when you're in pain, it feels so, you feel stripped of all power. You have no ability to control the outcome of the divorce, perhaps, or of the, bereavement, or you're laid off. It's like you just feel, and it's so easy to shift into victim mode. And yet, when you believe that in that pink slip, in that divorce, in that cancer diagnosis, if you choose to believe, like, no, God, you sent me into this. You didn't cause it, but you allowed it. Therefore, you have a purpose to redeem it, that you might sabotage darkness through your light that shines. So if I choose to believe this is a microphone you've handed me, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make sure I don't waste it. I'm going to get help. I'm going to get healing. I'm not, I don't think it's necessarily even right away you're going to discover. It wasn't many years. It was for many years Joseph found out what that purpose was. So you're not going to always know right away. And it's not so simple as, your liver cancer or your stomach cancer, whatever that is just, oh, well, now I have a great right ministry to cancer sufferers. Yes, it might be, but it might not have anything to do with it.
Right.
I've been so surprised and shocked at how many times pain I've experienced in one way qualifies me just to be more empathic and kind and sensitive. And I'm able to encourage someone who's dealing with a pain completely different to what I was facing.
Gosh, I just think of Harriet Tubman. We watched the movie Harriet, and she freed herself from slavery, but that wasn't enough. Like, she went through horrific pain and suffering, but she ran, and she freed herself, basically.
Well, and she knew she was free. That it was actually set up that she was all ready to be free at a certain age, but it didn't happen. So she chose to walk in that freedom, even though it was withheld from her.
But then it wasn't just that. She wasn't settled to just be free and to live her life, but she knew that she was called to save her people and to rescue and to help them to run to freedom. And I think that that's really what God calls us to, is to not just think about ourselves, but to think about the people that God would have us to help them come to freedom and help them find comfort and strength in Jesus, and not just our lives, but what God wants to do through us to others. And I love that you always preach this, and this is the truth, that when God blesses us, and the blessing could be in a form of difficulty, it could be in a form of something seemingly good too, but the blessing isn't always just for us. It's always so that God can flow it through us to other people. And that will help us as we view what we're going through as the microphone that God's called us to amplify our voice and to worship him in the pain and to glorify him and to point others to him, and simultaneously be that voice of encouragement and challenge and strength. And honestly, when I see people going through hardship and they're trusting God in the midst of it, it strengthens my faith like nothing ever could, because I see, okay, if they've gone through this, it's possible for me to go through that, but also to go through what God allows for me to go through. And I think the more that we can use our microphone and speak up of the goodness of God and the glory of God, that it will enable all of us to keep running and to keep showing up in the struggle that we're facing and the pain that we're facing, and to continue to perpetuate the light that we're called to be in this world. And it's a beautiful thing when we all catch that vision and we see that the purpose that God's called us to in it, because we're inspiring and strengthening the faith of people, and we're telling people about who God is, and that's the whole point. We're pointing people to Jesus, and people are giving their lives to Christ in the middle of our pain too. And that is what it's all about, is pointing people to Jesus.
Yeah, I think it's important for you to hear our hearts that Jennie and I are both saying to you, where your tendency might be to hide your scars and your tendency might be to keep those things covered up. You might be unwittingly holding back what could be the most helpful thing in your life, not only for other people, but for you. For when you give comfort you receive to other people by being willing to be vulnerable and open up about parts of your life, parts of your story, and things you've been through, that it might be the last thing in the world you want to talk about. You're like, I don't want to go there. Bringing it up's hard. It brings some PTSD out, and I understand that. And you might need counseling, and you might need, the community of God's people around you, and lots of, sort of self-work, internal work to get to a place where you're ready to do that. But I think if you even start by saying, maybe writing in your journal, maybe after this podcast is over, you just get alone and you even just tell God, God, I want to use any microphone you've given me, and I don't want to neglect the opportunity to get the good out of the bad.
Yeah,
there's no good in bad. We're not saying that the hard things you faced are good, but what we are saying is that God wants to turn it for good. That's the real meaning of Romans 8:28. It's not that everything's good. It's that God works all bad things, all things, that means bad included, for the good.
Yeah.
And sometimes that good is us just becoming more like Christ. Sometimes that good is a brand new ministry. So what we're really trying to say when we say your pain is a microphone, and that the more it hurts, the louder you get. And please, if you haven't yet, please do read chapter 8 of Through the Eyes of a Lion. If you haven't yet, get that book just for that chapter, honestly.
Yeah.
I would say this, that the suffering that you face in this life is not an obstacle to you being used by God, but rather it's an opportunity to be used like never before.
Amen.
But only if you have a humble heart, willing to see God use what will be very painful and raw when you first begin to bring it out, but then eventually will become a strength in your life that is something that inside of your misery, there's ministry, is what we're trying to say.
Gosh, it's so good, so helpful for all of us, and no matter what we're facing. And thank you.
Well,
for
thank
writing
you.
that.
And
That's
thank
beautiful.
you. And thank you.
you.
Thank you to all the ones. So yeah, we don't give homework out. This is a podcast. But
if we did
give homework, consider what what pain is meant to become a platform for you.
Yeah.
What testimony is waiting to be born out of your trial, and what might be a baby step towards telling that story or flexing that muscle. Because someone told me a long time ago that the hard things we face in this life are ways that we don't even realize it, but we're 9 feet tall, and other people need help reaching things from high shelves. And when you're, unbeknownst to you, 9 feet tall in an area, you're able to reach up high. And that gift is not just for you. God gives those gifts for other people. So as you use it, you'll begin to really receive benefit from it too, because anything that flows through you blesses you on the way out.
Yeah. And our prayer for you is that that you would see more of who God is, his love for you, and see your circumstance, your pain, your struggle as an opportunity for God to comfort you and show himself strong on your behalf and show him more of himself to you, and also to use you like never before. And it is a hard thing, but God calls us to do that.
Yeah, and if there's anybody in your life who you think could benefit from this podcast episode, maybe send it to them or post a link to it there on your Facebook page, or throw up that little graphic on your Instagram story, or maybe make a creative TikTok. I don't know. You know what? I'm just going to leave it to you on how you'll share this message. But we believe you have what it takes.
Yeah. We love you.
See you next week.
See you next week.